Emissions, those releases of substances into the atmosphere, have become a significant environmental concern in our modern world. As we strive to address climate change and pollution, several myths and misconceptions have emerged surrounding emissions and their impact on the planet. Today, we explore 10 common myths about emissions, unveiling the actual reality behind their sources, effects, and the urgent need for sustainable practices. Myth 1. Emissions from natural sources are negligible. One prevailing myth suggests that emissions from natural sources, such as volcanoes and wildfires, are negligible compared to human-made emissions. In reality, while natural emissions exist, human activities significantly contribute to overall greenhouse gas emissions. Myth 2. All emissions are harmful. The belief that all emissions are harmful overlooks the distinction between natural emissions necessary for ecological balance and anthropogenic emissions that contribute to climate change and air pollution. Myth 3. Emissions are primarily CO2. The misconception that emissions are primarily composed of carbon dioxide, CO2, disregards other greenhouse gases like methane, CH4, and nitrous oxide, N2O, which are potent contributors to global warming. Myth 4. Emission reduction is too costly. The myth that emission reduction is economically unfeasible neglects the growing evidence that investing in sustainable practices can lead to long-term cost savings and economic benefits. Myth 5. Electric vehicles produce no emissions. The common belief that electric vehicles produce no emissions overlooks the emissions associated with electricity generation. While EVs are cleaner than traditional vehicles, the source of electricity matters for their overall emissions impact. Myth 6. Renewable energy is inadequate to power the world. The misconception that renewable energy sources like solar and wind are inadequate to meet global energy demands disregards the rapid advancements in renewable technology and their potential to transform energy production. Myth 7. Emissions reduction hampers economic growth. The myth that emissions reduction measures hinder economic growth overlooks the potential for green technologies and sustainable practices to drive innovation, create jobs, and foster economic development. Myth 8. Emissions reduction is solely a government responsibility. The belief that emissions reduction is solely the responsibility of governments neglects the critical role of individuals, businesses, and industries in adopting sustainable practices and reducing emissions. Myth 9. Emission reduction is insignificant on a global scale. The common belief that individual emission reduction efforts are insignificant on a global scale dismisses the collective impact of many individuals and businesses working together to reduce emissions. Myth 10. Climate change is a natural cycle unrelated to emissions. The myth that climate change is solely a natural cycle unrelated to human-made emissions contradicts the overwhelming scientific consensus linking human activities to the rapid changes in our climate. As we dispel these 10 myths about emissions, we recognize the urgency of addressing climate change and pollution caused by human activities. Emissions from various sources impact our planet's climate, air quality, and ecosystems. The reality is that emission reduction is essential, achievable, and a shared responsibility across governments, businesses, communities, and individuals. By embracing sustainable practices, investing in clean technologies, and working together, we can create a more resilient and environmentally conscious world for future generations. The time for action is now, and our collective efforts can make a significant difference in preserving the health and well-being of our planet.